school leaders, let's look and see what's coming up for this very last lesson in this unit. As you remember, we're in the unit entitled Unstoppable Gospel. This is session number 6, Unstoppable Impact, and it's completely out of Acts 17. The point of the lesson is that the gospel of Jesus Christ can impact any culture. Now, like I said, this is the last week in this unit. Now, this week's lesson jumps ahead many, many years from last week's. This week we're looking at Paul. He's in his second missionary journey. As we look at the beginning of chapter 17, we can see that he was in Thessalonica, caused an uproar because of what he was preaching. So then he and his companions moved on to Berea. There again, more people in an uproar. Now, just a little side note here, that if people don't readily receive the gospel message, it's not necessarily a sign that you're doing something wrong. So, in Berea, Paul was sent off to Athens, and Silas and Timothy remained there in Berea. That brings us to this week's lesson. Paul's in Athens. He's waiting for Silas and Timothy to rejoin him. And as he walks around the town, he notices there are many idols to many, many gods. And there were two main thoughts of philosophy there in Athens, the Stoics and the Epicureans. Your lesson material has a lot of great information about those two philosophies. I would also look maybe in a Bible dictionary or some online resources just to see what some of their thoughts, their philosophies were, and compare that to today and some of the philosophies that exist today, and you'll see a lot of similarities. Now, you'll notice the lesson text is split up. Verses 16 through 18, 22 and 23, 30 and 31. If you have time, I'd recommend reading the entire, at least verses 16 through 34 in its entirety, just to get an overall feel for what's going on here. While Paul was in Athens, he preached Jesus and Jesus' resurrection. Now, the Athenians, they had no idea. They'd never heard of this before. And they were thinking to themselves, he must be preaching about some foreign god, because we've never heard of this before. And so Paul used this to his advantage. He had seen an altar with the inscription, "To the unknown God." And this was kind of to cover their bases in case they missed a god. They didn't want to make the god they missed mad, so they had the cover-all, the catch-all, to the unknown God. Now, Paul used this as common ground when he preached, and basically he said, you have all these idols, all these altars to various gods with a small g, but I preach about the one that you don't know. It's mentioned in this, the altar to the unknown God, that is God with a capital G. I think there are some good evangelism and witnessing pointers in our lesson today. First of all, you've got to know and respect the culture. Now, you don't want to go against biblical principles while you're in that culture, but know and respect that culture, and then find some common ground and go with that. Let me give you an example. I've got several Chinese students in my Sunday school class, so I'm going to ask them Sunday if this is correct. I remember hearing this years before and found this again on the internet, so it must be true, right? Now, let me ask you a question. How many people were on Noah's Ark? 8 is the correct answer. Now, I want you to look at these Chinese characters. You got the characters for person, and 8, and boat. You get 8 people on a boat. It's a large ship or an ark. And this is just one of the many ways that with Chinese characters you can use their own language to make a bridge to the Bible and to the gospel message. Now, did Jesus do this? Did he meet people where they were? Did he respect the culture and try to build some common ground? Well, as we look in John chapter 3, we see that Jesus is with Nicodemus. And Nicodemus is not just a Jew, but he's a ruler of the Jews. So he's proud of his Jewish heritage. He's counting on that to get him to heaven because he's one of God's chosen. And Jesus indirectly addresses this when he says, basically, physical birth's not enough. You must be born again. And then we get to the next chapter in John chapter 4, and he meets the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. And so here we have two cultures that really can't stand each other, the Jews and the Samaritans. And the conversation goes from talking about water and drinking water to living water, which he bridges to himself. So Jesus used this kind of technique as well when he was talking, when he was preaching to people. So it doesn't matter if you're talking to your neighbor who's never been to church, or you're on a mission trip overseas. Here's a bad evangelism strategy. Grab yourself a picket sign and tell people that God hates them and their sin. It's a bad evangelism strategy. How many people are going to be won because of that? Now, we don't want to discount sin, of course. Here's a good evangelism strategy. Meet people where they are. Find that common ground and work from there, one relationship at a time. The next week, we're going to have a 1-week special focus lesson on thanks and Thanksgiving. It's going to be out of 2 Chronicles. So, again, sorry for the lateness in this, but better late than never, I guess. Hope to see you next week.